Keep it. 24 hours. No limit. Buy whatever you want.
He gave her his black card on Christmas Eve. No limit, no rules. 15 hours later, the billionaire sat alone in his office, staring at a single receipt that made his hands shake, and for the first time in 30 years, he wept like a child. The notifications had stopped coming. Nathan Cole stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Chicago penthouse, watching the city blink awake beneath a pale winter sky. His phone rested face down on the mahogany desk behind him. He hadn't touched it in over an hour, not since the last alert came through at 5:47 a.m. Now it was almost 7, Christmas morning, and something inside him had quietly collapsed. He turned slowly, crossed the room, and picked up the phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. He didn't want to look again, but he couldn't stop himself. The transaction history was still open. He scrolled through it for the 5th time, 6th, 7th. Each line item burned itself deeper into his memory. Pharmacy, $42.17. Grocery store, $63.84. Children's toy, $7.99. Airline ticket, $289. Hospital payment, $1,200. That last one, that was the one that broke him. He set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter. Then he walked to his desk, lowered himself into the leather chair, and pressed his palms flat against the cold surface. His hands were trembling. Nathan Cole had built an empire worth $11 billion. He had closed deals that reshaped industries. He had fired men twice his age, without flinching, and never once questioned whether he was right. But tonight, a woman with nothing had done something he couldn't explain, and it terrified him. He reached for the printed receipts his assistant had prepared an hour ago, physical copies of every transaction. He didn't need them. He had already memorized every dollar, but holding the paper made it feel real. His eyes landed on the handwritten note attached to the airline purchase. "Please, don't let him die alone." Nathan read it again, and again, and again. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. "I was wrong," he whispered to the empty room. "I was so wrong." The words hung in the silence like smoke. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, letting the memory pull him under back to the beginning. Back to Christmas Eve. Back to the moment everything changed. Chicago, 17 hours earlier. The snow began falling just after 4 o'clock, soft and relentless, draping the city in white. Downtown, the hotels glittered with holiday lights. Taxis honked. Couples hurried into restaurants, laughing, clutching shopping bags stuffed with last-minute gifts. It was the kind of evening that made Chicago feel like a postcard. But Nathan Cole didn't notice any of it. He stepped out of the Langham Hotel at exactly 4:15 p.m., adjusting his charcoal overcoat as the cold hit his face. His driver was already waiting at the curb, engine running, heat blasting. Nathan paused on the sidewalk. He wasn't sure why. Later, he would think about this moment 1,000 times. This pause, this hesitation, this half-second where something made him stop and look to his left instead of walking straight to the car. He didn't believe in fate. He didn't believe in signs. But something made him turn. And that's when he saw her. She was standing near the corner, half hidden in the shadow of the building. Her coat was thin, too thin for this weather, and her arms were wrapped around herself in that way people hold themselves when they're trying to disappear. She wasn't begging. She wasn't holding a sign. She wasn't asking anyone for anything. She was just standing there, watching, waiting. For what? Nathan didn't know. Their eyes met for less than a second. Then she looked away. Nathan's driver honked once, a polite reminder. But Nathan didn't move. He studied her, the tension in her shoulders, the stillness of her posture. The quiet dignity in the way she refused to look at him again. She wasn't performing poverty. She wasn't asking for pity. She was simply existing in a world that had stopped seeing her. And for reasons he would never fully understand, Nathan found himself walking toward her. Not quickly, not with purpose, just walking. The woman glanced up as he approached. Her eyes were guarded, not hostile, but careful. The eyes of someone who had learned that strangers rarely brought good news. Nathan stopped a few feet away. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a black card. No name, no limit. He held it out. "You dropped this," he said.
I didn't.
The woman blinked. "I didn't." "Keep it."
I didn't.
His voice was flat, unreadable.
Keep it.
24
24
hours.
hours.
No limit.
No limit.
Spend it however you
Buy
want.
whatever you want.
She stared at the card like it might catch fire. "Why?" she asked quietly.
Why?
Nathan didn't answer. He pressed the card into her palm, turned, and walked back toward his car. He didn't look back. He never looked back. But as his driver pulled away from the curb, Nathan allowed himself one glance in the rearview mirror. The woman was still standing there, still staring at the card in her hand, and something in her expression made Nathan's chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. He pushed the feeling aside. He had given away money before, plenty of times, and every single time the result was the same greed, waste, entitlement. The poor didn't want help. They wanted handouts. And handouts never fixed anything. This woman would be no different. He was certain of it. By tomorrow morning, he expected to see charges for designer bags, expensive dinners, maybe a spa treatment or two. The usual, the predictable. He leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. Let her prove me right, he thought. Let her be like everyone else. But something nagged at him. Something small. Something he couldn't quite name. The way she had looked at him, not with gratitude, not with excitement, but with something closer to suspicion. As if she knew something he didn't. Nathan opened his eyes and stared out the window at the falling snow. 24 hours, he reminded himself. Then he'd have his answer. What could possibly make a billionaire weep over a stranger's receipts? And what did this woman do with 24 hours of unlimited wealth that shattered everything he believed? If you've ever doubted whether character still matters more than circumstance, stay close. This story is just beginning. The shelter sat on the corner of West Madison and Sacramento, a converted warehouse with barred windows and a hand-painted sign that read Hope's Door in faded blue letters. The paint was peeling. The O in door had chipped away years ago, and no one had bothered to fix it. Inside, the air smelled of industrial disinfectant and reheated soup. Fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale, tired glow. Rows of cots stretched across the main floor, 63 of them, each separated by exactly 18 inches of space. Not enough room for privacy, just enough room for survival. Mariah Brooks sat on cot number 27, her back against the cinder block wall, her eyes fixed on her daughter's face. Talia was 8 years old. She had her mother's high cheekbones and her father's stubborn chin, a man Mariah hadn't seen in 6 years and didn't plan on seeing again. Tonight, Talia's lips were slightly parted, her breathing shallow and uneven, each exhale carrying a faint whistle that made Mariah's stomach clench. The inhaler was empty, had been empty since yesterday morning. Mariah had shaken it twice, 3 times, 4, pressing it to Talia's lips and praying for one more puff, one more hour, one more night. But prayers didn't refill prescriptions. And the pharmacy on Kedzie Avenue didn't accept hope as payment. She pulled the thin blanket higher over Talia's shoulders and smoothed a braid away from her forehead. "Mama's here," she whispered. "Mama's not going anywhere." Talia stirred, but didn't wake. Across the room, a woman coughed violently. A baby cried somewhere near the back. 2 men argued in hushed voices over a missing phone charger. The sounds of 63 lives, pressed together in a space built for half that number. Mariah closed her eyes. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. There had been soup, a thin, watery broth with bits of potato floating in it. But she'd given her portion to Talia, told her she wasn't hungry, told her mama had already eaten at work. The lie came easily now. It had become a kind of reflex. She thought about the morning ahead, Christmas Day. Talia would wake up expecting something, anything, and Mariah would have to find the words to explain why Santa hadn't come, why the other kids at the shelter had candy canes and she didn't, why some prayers got answered and others just echoed into silence. Mariah opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. 29 years old, a bachelor's degree in social work from Chicago State, 3 years of experience at a nonprofit that had closed its doors last spring, 8 months of job applications, 42 rejections, and now this, a cot in a shelter on Christmas Eve, watching her daughter struggle to breathe. This wasn't the plan. None of this was the plan. 14 miles north, Nathan Cole sat in his penthouse study, swirling a glass of 40-year-old scotch. The room was immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with first editions he'd never read. A Basquiat original hung above the fireplace, $14.6 million at auction. Purchased because his advisor said it would appreciate. Italian leather furniture arranged with geometric precision. Everything tasteful, everything expensive, everything exactly where it belonged. Nathan took a sip and stared at the flames dancing in the fireplace. He wasn't thinking about the woman, not consciously. He was thinking about the quarterly projections for Cole Industries, about the board meeting scheduled for January 3rd, about the keynote speech he was supposed to deliver at Davos in 3 weeks. But the woman's face kept surfacing. Those eyes, not desperate, not grateful, careful, guarded, almost defiant. He set down the glass and picked up his phone. The card he'd given her was linked to a secondary account, one he'd set up years ago for exactly this purpose. He could track every transaction in real time, watch every dollar as it moved. The screen was blank. No notifications, no charges. Nathan frowned. Most people started spending within minutes. The greed was always immediate, a kind of fever that took hold the moment they realized the money was real. He'd seen it dozens of times. A hotel room, a steak dinner, jewelry, electronics. The poor, he'd learned, didn't dream small. They dreamed loud, and they spent even louder. But this woman? Nothing. 2 hours had passed, and she hadn't spent a single cent. Nathan leaned back in his chair and considered the possibilities. Maybe she didn't believe it was real. Maybe she was afraid of a trap. Maybe she was smarter than she looked and was waiting for the right moment. Or maybe, no. He dismissed the thought before it fully formed. There was no maybe. There was only pattern, and the pattern never changed. He set the phone face down on the desk and picked up his scotch again. She would spend. They always did. And when she did, he would be watching. Back at the shelter, Mariah stood slowly, careful not to wake Talia. She pulled on her coat, a thin wool peacoat she'd bought at Goodwill 3 winters ago, and slipped the black card into her pocket. She still didn't know why she'd taken it. Pride told her to throw it away. Experience told her it was a scam. Common sense told her that men in expensive coats didn't hand out unlimited credit cards to strangers without wanting something in return. But Talia's breathing told her something else. It told her that pride didn't fill prescriptions, that experience didn't buy inhalers. That common sense meant nothing when your child was struggling to breathe and you had $17 in a checking account that would be overdrawn by morning. Mariah touched the card through the fabric of her coat. She thought about her mother, gone 4 years now, taken by a stroke that came without warning. She thought about the last thing her mother ever said to her, sitting in that hospital bed, voice barely above a whisper. "Baby, sometimes God sends help in strange packages. Don't be too proud to unwrap it. Mariah blinked hard and swallowed the lump in her throat. This wasn't how she wanted to spend Christmas Eve, walking into the cold with a stranger's money, not knowing if it was a gift or a trap or something in between. But Talia needed medicine, and that was the only math that mattered. She leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her daughter's forehead. "I'll be back," she whispered. "I promise." Then she walked toward the shelter's front door, pushed it open, and stepped out into the snow. The cold hit her like a wall. Mariah pulled her coat tighter and started walking. The pharmacy was 6 blocks away, a small, family-owned place that stayed open late on holidays. She'd been there before, back when she had insurance, back when a $40 inhaler didn't feel like a ransom note. The streets were mostly empty. A few cars crawled past, headlights cutting through the falling snow. Christmas lights blinked in apartment windows. Somewhere, a radio played Silent Night. Mariah kept her head down and walked faster. She didn't think about the cold. She didn't think about the card in her pocket. She thought about Talia's face when she woke up tomorrow morning. She thought about the promise she'd made 3 years ago when they'd first ended up in a shelter, when Talia had looked up at her with those wide brown eyes and asked, "Mama, are we going to be okay?" "Yes, baby," Mariah had said. "We're going to be just fine." She'd been lying then. But tonight, she had a chance to make it true, even if only for one night. She reached the pharmacy at 6:42 p.m. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. A tired-looking man behind the counter glanced up, then back down at his newspaper. Mariah walked to the back, found the aisle she needed, and picked up an inhaler. Then a box of nebulizer solution. Then children's cough syrup, just in case. She carried everything to the counter and set it down. The man looked at her, then at the items, then back at her. "That'll be $42.17, he said. Mariah pulled out the black card. Her hand trembled slightly as she held it out. The man swiped it. The machine beeped. A receipt printed. "Merry Christmas," he said flatly, sliding the bag across the counter. Mariah took it and walked out without a word. The cold didn't feel as sharp now. She had medicine. Talia would breathe easier tonight. And somewhere across the city, a notification lit up Nathan Cole's phone. Pharmacy, $42.17. A mother walking through the snow to save her daughter's breath. A billionaire watching from the shadows, waiting for proof of what he already believes. But what happens when every assumption starts to crumble? If you've ever fought a battle no one else could see, if you already know this story, stay with it. Nathan saw the notification and set down his scotch. Pharmacy, $42.17. He stared at the screen for a long moment, waiting for the next charge. A restaurant, maybe. A clothing store. Something that would confirm what he already knew. But the screen stayed dark. He picked up the glass again, took a slow sip, and turned his gaze back to the fire. $42. That was nothing. A rounding error. The price of a single bottle of wine at the restaurant where he'd had lunch yesterday. And yet something about that number, its smallness, its specificity, bothered him in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Pharmacy. Not a spa. Not a hotel. Not a jewelry store. Pharmacy. Nathan swirled the scotch and watched the amber liquid catch the light. He was 53 years old. He had been wealthy for 30 of those years. Truly wealthy. The kind of wealthy where money stopped being a number and became a force, a gravity, a thing that bent the world around it. And in all that time, he had learned one unchanging truth about human nature. People disappointed you. Always. It wasn't malice. It wasn't even weakness, exactly. It was simply the way things were. Give a man $1, and he'd ask for 2. Give him 2, and he'd resent you for not giving 5. Generosity didn't inspire gratitude. it inspired expectation, and expectation, left unchecked, curdled into entitlement. Nathan had learned this lesson early. He thought about his father, a steelworker from Gary, Indiana, who had spent 40 years grinding his body into dust for a pension that barely covered his medical bills. Frank Cole had believed in hard work, believed in earning, believed that a man's character was measured by what he built with his own two hands. And when Frank Cole died at 61, lungs full of fluid, body broken, dignity stripped away in a hospital bed that smelled of antiseptic and defeat, Nathan had made himself a promise. He would never be weak. He would never be dependent. He would never trust anyone to save him. That promise had carried him through 3 decades of corporate warfare. It had made him a billionaire. It had earned him the cover of Fortune magazine, a seat at tables where policy was shaped and futures were decided. But it had cost him things too. A marriage that ended after 7 years, when his wife finally admitted she felt more like an acquisition than a partner. A son who had stopped returning his calls somewhere around the age of 25 and now lived in Portland doing something with pottery that Nathan didn't understand and had never asked about. A string of relationships that began with attraction and ended with the same quiet accusation: you don't let anyone in. Nathan didn't argue with the accusation. He simply didn't see the point. Letting people in meant giving them power, and power, once given, was always abused. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Chicago sparkled in the snow, 1,000 points of light scattered across the darkness. Somewhere down there, people were gathered around Christmas trees, exchanging gifts, pretending that love was simple and life was kind. Nathan didn't begrudge them their illusions. He simply didn't share them. He thought about the woman again, the way she had looked at him outside the hotel. That expression, not grateful, not desperate, but something else. Something he couldn't quite name. Most people, when they encountered his wealth, reacted in predictable ways. They became smaller, somehow, deferential. Their voices changed. Their posture shifted. They smiled too quickly and laughed too loudly at things that weren't funny. But this woman had done none of that. She had looked at him like she was the one doing him a favor. Nathan's jaw tightened. He didn't like that. Didn't like the way it made him feel. Off balance, uncertain, as if the rules he had spent a lifetime mastering no longer applied. He pulled out his phone and checked the transactions again. Still just the pharmacy. $42.17. Nothing else. The fire crackled behind him as he returned to his chair. He thought about the countless times he had tried this experiment before. The card, the freedom, the test. It had started almost 15 years ago, after a conversation with a colleague who ran a charitable foundation. The man had been earnest, passionate, full of statistics about poverty and potential and the transformative power of direct giving. You don't understand, he had told Nathan. Poor people aren't poor because they make bad decisions. They make bad decisions because they're poor. Give them resources and they'll surprise you. Nathan had listened politely, and then he had decided to find out for himself. Over the years, he had given the card to dozens of people. Homeless men on street corners, single mothers in grocery store parking lots, day laborers waiting outside hardware stores. Each time, he had tracked every transaction, watched every dollar, waited for the surprise his colleague had promised. It never came. The money always went the same places: alcohol, gambling, electronics, expensive meals, small luxuries that provided momentary pleasure and long-term nothing. One man had spent $8,000 in 6 hours, mostly at a casino, where he had proceeded to lose every cent. A woman had bought a designer handbag, a plane ticket to Miami, and 3 bottles of champagne before the first day was over. Another had simply withdrawn the maximum cash amount from an ATM and disappeared entirely. Nathan had stopped being disappointed by these outcomes. He had started expecting them. The poor weren't poor because of circumstance. They were poor because of character. This was not cruelty. This was not judgment. This was simply observation. His phone buzzed. Nathan looked down. Grocery store. $63.84. He exhaled slowly. There it is, he thought. The beginning of the slide. Groceries could mean anything. A cart full of steaks and lobster, expensive cheeses, imported wine. He had seen it before. The way people who had nothing suddenly decided they deserved everything. But even as the cynicism rose in his chest, something else flickered beneath it. Something small and unwelcome. Curiosity. Why groceries? Why not a restaurant? And why, after almost 3 hours, had she only spent $100? Nathan set the phone down and stared at the fire. It didn't matter. The night was young, the card had no limit, and human nature was nothing if not consistent. By morning, she would prove him right. They always did. But the phone buzzed again. Nathan glanced at the screen. Children's toy store, $7.99. He blinked. $7.99. At a toy store. On Christmas Eve. Nathan picked up the phone and stared at the notification for a long moment. Something shifted in his chest. A hairline crack in the wall he had spent decades building. He set the phone down quickly, as if it had burned him. It means nothing, he told himself. A cheap trinket, a momentary impulse. The real spending would come later, but his hand was trembling slightly as he reached for his scotch. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Nathan Cole was not entirely certain what would happen next. Outside, the snow continued to fall. And somewhere across the city, a mother walked through the cold with a plastic bag full of medicine, a small bag of groceries, and a pink unicorn that had cost less than his morning coffee. She didn't know she was being watched. She didn't know she was being judged. And she didn't know that every step she took was quietly dismantling a philosophy that had taken 30 years to build. A billionaire so certain of his beliefs that he turned generosity into a test. But what happens when the test starts testing him instead? If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they had you figured out, this next part is for you. Keep watching. Mariah stood outside the grocery store, plastic bags hanging from her wrists, snow settling on her shoulders. She had spent $114 of a stranger's money, and she still didn't know why he had given it to her. The pharmacy bag was heaviest, the inhaler, the nebulizer solution, the cough syrup that would help Talia sleep through the night without that awful rattling sound in her chest. The grocery bag held enough food to feed Mrs. Patterson's twins for 3 days, and the smallest bag, the one she held closest to her body, contained a pink plastic unicorn with a chipped ear. Talia's Christmas wish. $7.99. Mariah started walking back toward the shelter, her breath clouding in the frozen air. The streets were emptier now. Most people had retreated indoors, gathered around tables heavy with food and conversation. She passed apartment windows glowing with Christmas lights, heard laughter muffled by glass and brick, smelled roasting meat from somewhere above. Her stomach cramped. She ignored it. She had eaten yesterday. Or was it the day before? The hours blurred together when you were tired enough. Sleep came in fragments, 20 minutes here, an hour there, always interrupted by Talia's coughing or the shelter's fluorescent lights or the sound of someone crying in the cot next to hers. Mariah adjusted the bags and kept walking. The shelter was quiet when she returned. Most of the residents had settled into their cots for the night, wrapped in donated blankets, faces turned toward walls or ceilings, or private griefs that no one else could see. A small television in the corner played a muted Christmas movie, Jimmy Stewart running through snow-covered streets, arms spread wide, shouting something joyful that no one in this room could hear. Mariah moved carefully between the cots until she reached number 27. Talia was still sleeping, but her breathing was worse. Mariah could hear it from 3 feet away, that thin, whistling wheeze that meant her airways were narrowing, that meant the inflammation was winning, that meant every breath was a battle. Her daughter's small body was slowly losing. She knelt beside the cot and unzipped the pharmacy bag. The inhaler first. She shook it, full, heavy, real, and pressed it gently to Talia's lips. "Baby," she whispered, "wake up for Mama, just for a second." Talia stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with sleep and fever. "Breathe in," Mariah said. Nice and slow. She pressed the inhaler and watched Talia's chest expand. 1 puff, 2, the medicine entering her lungs, opening the passages, giving her body the help it needed to do what should have been effortless. Talia's breathing steadied. Not perfect, but better. Mariah smoothed her daughter's hair and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Go back to sleep," she whispered. "Mama's here." Talia's eyes closed. Within seconds, she was asleep again, but her chest rose and fell more evenly now, the wheeze fading to a soft, rhythmic sound that Mariah could finally bear to hear. She sat back on her heels and exhaled. For the first time in 3 days, she felt something loosen in her chest. Not hope, exactly. Hope was too expensive, too dangerous, too easy to lose. But something adjacent to hope, a small, stubborn flame that refused to die no matter how hard the wind blew. She reached into her coat and pulled out the black card. It was still there, still real, still impossible. She turned it over in her hands, studying it in the dim light. No name, no numbers, just smooth black plastic that seemed to absorb the glow of the fluorescent bulbs overhead. 24 hours, the man had said. How many hours were left? She tried to calculate. He had given her the card around 4:30, and now it was almost 9. That meant she had used less than 5 hours, less than a quarter of the time. And she had spent barely over $100. Mariah stared at the card. She thought about what she could do with the remaining hours, the remaining money, a hotel room, a real bed, clean sheets, a door that locked, new coats for her and Talia, a security deposit on an apartment, maybe, first month's rent, a chance to climb out of this hole and start building something solid again. The possibilities spread out before her like a map of a country she had only ever seen from the outside. But even as she considered them, something held her back. She thought about the man's face, that flat expression, those cold gray eyes, the way he had handed her the card without warmth, without kindness, without any of the things that usually accompanied generosity. He was testing her. She didn't know how she knew, but she knew. This wasn't charity. This was an experiment, and she was the subject. The realization should have made her angry. It did make her angry, a low, simmering fury at being reduced to data, to evidence, to proof of whatever theory this man had already decided was true. But beneath the anger, something else stirred. Determination. If he wanted to watch, let him watch. If he wanted to judge, let him judge. She would spend every dollar of his money exactly the way she chose. Not to impress him, not to prove him wrong, but because she knew who she was. And no amount of money would change that. Mariah slipped the card back into her pocket and looked at her sleeping daughter. Tomorrow was Christmas. Talia would wake up breathing easier. She would find a pink unicorn waiting beside her pillow. Not wrapped, because Mariah had no wrapping paper, but real, solid, hers. It wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes, something was everything. Mariah leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. She had 19 hours left, and she was just getting started. A stranger's test, a mother's pride, 19 hours and a decision that could change everything. What do you think Mariah would do? What would you do if you knew someone was watching your every move, judging every dollar? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what Mariah does next. Nathan couldn't sleep. He had tried, turned off the lights, pulled the Italian linen sheets up to his chin, closed his eyes and waited for unconsciousness to take him. But every time he started to drift, the numbers crept back into his mind, stubborn and relentless. $42.17, $63.84, $7.99. He had memorized them without meaning to. They played on a loop in his head, each figure a question he couldn't answer. Pharmacy, groceries, a children's toy. Nathan sat up in bed and rubbed his face with both hands. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. By now, she should have checked in to a hotel, ordered champagne, bought herself something extravagant, jewelry, maybe, or designer clothes, or a first-class ticket to somewhere warm. That's what they always did. That's what everyone did when they suddenly had access to money they hadn't earned. But this woman, $114. That was it. A toy that cost less than his morning espresso. Groceries that wouldn't feed a family for a week. Medicine. Nathan threw off the sheets and walked to the window. The city stretched out below him, glittering and cold. Somewhere out there, a woman he had never met was making decisions he couldn't understand. And it was driving him insane. He got dressed without thinking about it. Black coat, gray scarf, the kind of clothes that cost thousands, but were designed to look like they cost nothing. The quiet uniform of the obscenely wealthy. His driver was off for the night. Christmas Eve. Nathan had given him the time off, in a rare moment of something adjacent to generosity. So he drove himself. The Bentley purred through empty streets, windshield wipers pushing aside the falling snow. Nathan didn't know where he was going, not exactly, but he had her location. Every transaction pinged a GPS coordinate, a feature he'd requested years ago, back when he first started running these experiments. He told himself it was for security, for data, for understanding. He didn't tell himself it was for watching. The coordinates led him west, away from the glittering towers of downtown, into neighborhoods where the streetlights flickered and the buildings sagged under the weight of decades of neglect. He parked a block away from the shelter and killed the engine. And then he waited. She emerged just after 10 p.m. Nathan almost missed her. She was wearing the same thin coat from earlier, the same worn shoes, the same quiet determination in her posture. But something had changed. She walked differently now. Not faster, exactly, but with purpose. Like she knew exactly where she was going and why. Nathan stepped out of the car and followed at a distance. The snow muffled his footsteps. The cold bit at his face. He hadn't dressed for this, hadn't anticipated standing on frozen sidewalks, trailing a stranger through the worst parts of the city. But he couldn't stop. He needed to see. She walked for 6 blocks before she stopped. It was a run-down apartment building, 3 stories, brick facade crumbling, half the windows dark. A woman stood in the doorway, 2 toddlers clinging to her legs, their faces pale and pinched with hunger. Nathan pressed himself into the shadow of a doorway and watched. Mariah approached the woman slowly. She was carrying a plastic bag, groceries, from the look of it. Nathan frowned. The transaction had already come through hours ago, $63.84. But she had returned to the shelter after that, which meant she hadn't kept the food for herself. She was giving it away. He watched as Mariah held out the bag. watched as the woman shook her head, pride and desperation warring on her face. Watched as Mariah pressed the bag into her hands anyway, her voice too low to hear but her meaning unmistakable. "Take it, please, just for tonight." The woman's shoulders began to shake. She clutched the bag to her chest like it was the most precious thing she had ever held. Mariah said something else, brief, quiet, and then she turned and walked away. She didn't look back. Nathan stood frozen in the shadows. His chest felt tight. His throat burned. He had expected waste. He had expected selfishness. He had expected confirmation of every cynical truth he had spent 30 years accumulating. Instead, he watched a woman with nothing give away the little she had. He pressed his back against the cold brick and tried to breathe. "This doesn't mean anything," he told himself. One act of charity doesn't erase a lifetime of pattern. She could still disappoint him. She could still prove him right. But the words felt hollow. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Nathan Cole wasn't certain of anything. He followed her for another hour. She stopped at a 24-hour laundromat where an elderly man sat alone, feeding quarters into a machine. She bought him coffee from a vending machine and sat with him for 15 minutes, talking quietly, laughing once at something he said. She stopped at a church that was still lit for midnight mass. She didn't go inside, just stood on the steps for a moment, head bowed, lips moving in what might have been a prayer. She stopped at a payphone, one of the last in the city, and made a call that lasted less than 2 minutes. When she hung up, her face was wet with tears. Nathan watched all of it, and with every stop, every small act of grace, he felt something inside him begin to crack. By midnight, he couldn't follow anymore. His feet were numb. His face was raw from the cold. But that wasn't why he stopped. He stopped because he couldn't bear to see anymore. Every transaction that hit his phone was a rebuke. Every dollar she spent was an accusation. She wasn't wasting his money. She wasn't indulging herself. She wasn't proving his theories right. She was dismantling them, one receipt at a time. Nathan walked back to his car in silence. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through the transaction history. Pharmacy, $42.17. Grocery store, $63.84. Children's toy store, $7.99. Coffee, $2.50. $116.50. That was it. That was everything she had spent in nearly 8 hours. He set the phone down and leaned his head back against the seat. The woman had access to unlimited funds. She could have bought anything, done anything, become anyone. And instead, she had spent her night giving to people who had even less than she did. Nathan closed his eyes. He thought about his father, about the philosophy he had built his life around, about the certainty that had carried him through 3 decades of success and solitude. The poor don't want help. They want handouts. Charity creates dependence. Trust is weakness. He had believed those things, truly believed them. They had become the architecture of his soul, the load-bearing walls that held everything else in place. But now, sitting in a freezing car on a dark street on Christmas Eve, he felt those walls beginning to tremble, and he didn't know what would be left when they fell. A billionaire watching from the shadows, a mother giving away what little she has, and a philosophy built on certainty beginning to crack. Have you ever had someone prove everything you believed completely wrong? Share your story in the comments. And if you're feeling what Nathan's feeling right now, hit that like button. This story is far from over. Nathan made it home by 1 a.m. He poured himself a scotch, then another, then a third that he didn't finish. The glass sat on his desk, amber liquid catching the low light, untouched and warming. He couldn't stop thinking about the payphone. That call. Those tears. Who did a woman with nothing call at 10:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve? And why had she cried like that? Not the loud, dramatic sobs of performance, but the quiet, shuddering kind that came from somewhere deep and unreachable. Nathan loosened his tie and stared at the ceiling. He had built his fortune on reading people, on understanding what they wanted before they knew it themselves, on anticipating moves 3 steps ahead and positioning himself to profit from every one. But this woman, he couldn't read her. Every assumption he made, she contradicted. Every pattern he expected, she broke. She was a cipher wrapped in a thin coat, walking through the snow like she had somewhere important to be. And he had no idea where that was. Sleep came in fragments. He dozed on the couch, still in his clothes, waking every hour to check his phone. The notifications had stopped. No new transactions since the coffee at the laundromat. $116.50. The number mocked him. At 3 a.m., he gave up on sleep entirely. He showered, changed into fresh clothes, and sat in his study with the lights off, watching the snow fall outside the window. He thought about his son, David, 31 years old now, living in Portland, making pottery, refusing to answer his father's calls. The last time they had spoken, really spoken, was 4 years ago, at a restaurant in Manhattan. Nathan had offered to invest in his son's business. David had laughed. Not a happy laugh. A bitter one. "You don't get it, Dad," he had said. "You think everything is a transaction. Even love. Even family. You can't just buy your way into my life." Nathan had argued, had explained, had laid out the logic of his position with the same precision he brought to boardroom negotiations. David had stood up, dropped $200 on the table, "For your time," he said, and walked out. They hadn't spoken since. Nathan stared at the snow and wondered if his son was awake right now, wondered if he was happy, wondered if he ever thought about his father, or if Nathan had become just another unpleasant memory to be filed away and forgotten. The silence of the penthouse pressed in around him. At 4:15 a.m., he made coffee. At 4:30, he checked the transaction history again. Nothing new. At 4:47, he started composing an email to his son. He got as far as, "David, I've been thinking," before deleting it. At 5:07 a.m., his phone vibrated. Nathan grabbed it so fast, he nearly knocked over his coffee. Airline ticket, $289. He stared at the notification, heart pounding. There it is, he thought. Finally. She was running. That had to be it. She had taken his money, played her little game of charity, and now she was using the rest to disappear. A flight to Miami, probably, or Los Angeles. Somewhere warm, somewhere far, somewhere she could reinvent herself on his dime. He had seen it before. The slow build, the performance of virtue, and then the escape. The pattern was always the same. Nathan opened the transaction details, ready to confirm what he already knew. Destination: Atlanta Airline, Delta departure, 6:15 a.m. Passenger: Mariah Brooks. Atlanta. Nathan frowned. Not Miami, not Los Angeles, not any of the places people ran to when they wanted to disappear. Atlanta. He scrolled further, looking for more details. There had to be a hotel booking, a rental car, something that would explain why a woman with nothing would fly to Georgia at 6 in the morning on Christmas Day. Instead, he found a note. It was attached to the purchase confirmation, a field he didn't even know existed. Optional. Most people left it blank. But she hadn't. 4 words. Please, don't let him die alone. Nathan read the note 3 times. His hands were trembling. He set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter, and pressed his palms flat against the desk. Please don't let him die alone. Him, not her. Not herself. someone else. Nathan picked up the phone again and searched the transaction details for any additional information. There had to be more. A name, an address, something. He found it buried in the purchase metadata. Associated booking, Grady Memorial Hospital, Atlanta, GA. A hospital. She wasn't running. She was flying across the country on Christmas morning to be with someone who was dying. Nathan stood up so fast, his chair rolled back and hit the bookshelf. He paced the length of his study, mind racing. Who was it? A relative? A friend? Someone she owed money to? Or someone who owed her? And why? Why would a woman who had nothing, who had been given unlimited resources for 24 hours, spend her money on a plane ticket to watch a stranger die? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. Unless Nathan stopped pacing. Unless she wasn't who he thought she was. Unless the patterns he had spent 30 years observing were wrong. Unless the philosophy he had built his life around was based on a lie he had told himself so many times he had forgotten it was a lie. Unless people could actually be good. Not good for something. Not good for show. Just good. Quietly, stubbornly, impossibly good. Nathan sank into his chair and stared at the note on his screen. Please don't let him die alone. He thought about his father, dying in that hospital bed, lungs full of fluid, dignity stripped away. He thought about standing in the doorway, watching the monitors beep, unable to cross the threshold, unable to hold his hand, unable to say the things that needed to be said. He had told himself it was because he was strong, because he didn't need the closure, because sentiment was weakness, and weakness was death. But sitting here now, in the dark, on Christmas morning, he knew the truth. He had been afraid. And his father had died alone. Nathan looked at the clock. 5:23 a.m. Her flight left at 6:15. He had less than an hour. He didn't know what he was going to do. Didn't know what he would say if he found her. Didn't know if she would even want to see him, the stranger who had handed her a card and walked away without explanation. But he knew he couldn't stay here. He knew he couldn't let her fly to Atlanta alone while he sat in his penthouse, watching the snow fall, pretending that none of this mattered. Nathan grabbed his coat and his keys. He was out the door before he could change his mind. A plane ticket to a dying boy's bedside. A note that shattered everything. And a billionaire racing through the snow, chasing a woman he doesn't understand. What would make you drop everything and fly across the country on Christmas morning? Tell us in the comments and hit that share button. Someone you know needs to hear this story. The flight was nearly empty. Nathan had booked the last seat in first class, 3 rows behind Mariah, close enough to watch, but far enough to remain unseen. She sat by the window, forehead pressed against the glass, eyes fixed on the clouds below. She hadn't noticed him. Or if she had, she didn't show it. Nathan studied her from behind his newspaper. She looked smaller somehow. The determination he had seen last night had been replaced by something else. Something fragile. Something barely held together. Her hands were folded in her lap. Fingers intertwined so tightly, her knuckles had gone pale. She didn't order anything when the flight attendant came by. Didn't read. Didn't sleep. Just stared out the window like she was memorizing the sky. Nathan lowered his newspaper and watched her shoulders rise and fall with each breath. Who are you, he thought, and who is waiting for you in Atlanta? Grady Memorial Hospital sat in the heart of downtown Atlanta, a sprawling complex of brick and glass that had served the city's poorest residents for over a century. Nathan had never been inside. He had donated to hospitals before, written checks with enough zeros to name wings and endow research chairs. But he had never walked through the doors, never sat in the waiting rooms, never smelled that particular mixture of antiseptic and grief that hung in the air like fog. He followed Mariah through the entrance, keeping his distance. She moved with purpose now, weaving through the corridors like she had been here before, past the information desk, past the gift shop with its wilting flowers and deflated balloons, past the elevator bank to a stairwell at the end of the hall. Nathan hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. He could still leave, could still walk away, fly back to Chicago, pretend this had never happened. He had seen enough, learned enough. He didn't need to follow her any further. But his feet carried him up the stairs anyway. 3rd floor, pediatric wing. The sign hit him like a punch to the chest. Pediatric oncology. He found her standing outside a room at the end of the hall. The door was open. Inside, a small boy lay in a bed that seemed to swallow him whole. Tubes and wires snaking from his arms. Monitors blinking their steady rhythm. A Philadelphia Eagles cap pulled low over eyes that were closed in sleep. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Mariah stood in the doorway, one hand pressed against the frame, the other covering her mouth. Her shoulders shook. No sound came out. Nathan pressed himself against the wall, watching. A nurse approached Mariah and touched her arm gently. They spoke in low voices, too quiet for Nathan to hear. The nurse gestured toward the room, and Mariah nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She stepped inside. Nathan watched her cross to the bed and sink into the chair beside it. She reached out and took the boy's hand so small, so fragile, so impossibly thin, and pressed it to her cheek. "I'm here, baby," she whispered. "Auntie's here." Auntie. The word echoed in Nathan's mind as he stood frozen in the hallway. Not her son. Her nephew. He thought about the transaction history, the pharmacy, the groceries, the toy. She had a daughter of her own, a daughter who was sick, who needed medicine, who was sleeping in a shelter on Christmas Eve. And yet she had flown across the country to sit with a dying boy who wasn't even hers. Nathan leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. He thought about his own family, his son, who wouldn't return his calls, his ex-wife, who had moved to London and remarried, the empty penthouse, the silent dinners, the Christmas mornings spent alone with a glass of scotch and the Wall Street Journal. He had told himself he didn't need anyone. That solitude was strength. That love was a liability. And connection was a weakness that could be exploited. But watching Mariah hold that boy's hand, he saw something he hadn't allowed himself to see in 30 years. He saw what he had lost. An hour passed. Nathan sat in the waiting room at the end of the hall, pretending to read a magazine he had picked up from the table. The words blurred on the page. He couldn't focus on anything except the room at the end of the hall and the woman inside it. A doctor emerged from the room and walked to the nurse's station. Nathan watched him flip through a chart, his expression unreadable. Then the doctor walked toward the waiting room. He stopped in front of Nathan. "Are you with Miss Brooks?" Nathan hesitated. Yes." The doctor nodded slowly. "The boy, Jalen, he's stable for now, but his condition is advanced. We're doing everything we can to keep him comfortable." "How long?" Nathan heard himself ask. The doctor's face softened with a grief that seemed practiced, but still genuine. "Days, maybe a week, if we're lucky." Nathan swallowed hard. "And his parents?" "Mother passed 2 years ago. Complications from lupus. Father's been out of the picture since before Jalen was born." The doctor paused. "Miss Brooks is the only family he has left." Nathan nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak. The doctor studied him for a moment. "She flew in this morning from Chicago. Said she got a call last night that he had taken a turn." He shook his head. "I don't know how she afforded the ticket, but she made it. That's what matters." He walked away, leaving Nathan alone with the weight of what he had just learned. She emerged from the room just after noon. Her eyes were red, her face drawn, her movements slow and heavy. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the space of a morning. Nathan stood. She saw him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just stood there, 10 feet apart. Strangers who had become something else without either of them understanding how. "You followed me," she said. Not a question. "Yes. Why?" Nathan opened his mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. Why had he followed her? What did he hope to find? What did he think he could possibly say to a woman who had just spent 3 hours holding the hand of a dying child? "I don't know," he admitted. Mariah studied him with those careful, guarded eyes. The same eyes that had stopped him on the street outside the hotel. The same eyes that had made him hand over the card in the first place. "You thought I would waste it," she said quietly. "The money. You thought I would prove whatever you already believed about people like me." It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. Nathan couldn't deny it. "Yes," he said. "I did." She nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she had suspected all along. "And now?" Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, at the thin coat and the worn shoes and the quiet dignity that no amount of poverty could strip away. At the woman who had been given unlimited resources and had spent them on medicine for her daughter, food for strangers, and a plane ticket to hold a dying boy's hand. "Now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know what I believe anymore." And Rio. Mariah held his gaze for a long moment. Then she did something Nathan didn't expect. She sat down, not next to him, across from him, in one of the hard plastic chairs that lined the waiting room. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at him with an expression that wasn't anger, wasn't forgiveness, wasn't anything he could name. "His name is Jalen," she said. "He's my sister's son. She died 2 years ago, and I promised her I would take care of him. But then I lost my job, and then my apartment, and then..." She stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is I couldn't keep my promise. He got sick, and I couldn't afford to bring him to Chicago, couldn't afford the treatments, couldn't afford anything. So he stayed here. With the state, in a hospital that's been more of a home to him than I ever could be." Her voice cracked on the last word. Nathan sat in silence, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. "When I got that call last night," Mariah continued, "I thought, this is it. This is my last chance. If I don't get to Atlanta, he's going to die without ever knowing that someone loved him, that someone tried." She looked down at her hands. "So I used your card. I didn't care if it was a test. I didn't care if you were watching. I just needed to get here. I needed him to know." She looked up, and Nathan saw that her eyes were wet. "That's all I needed." Nathan felt something break open inside him. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no sobs, no outward sign of the earthquake happening beneath his skin. Just a quiet collapse, like a building that had been condemned for years, finally giving way. He had spent 3 decades building walls, accumulating evidence, constructing a philosophy that protected him from disappointment, from betrayal, from the unbearable vulnerability of trusting another human being. And in one night, this woman had reduced it all to rubble, not with arguments, not with speeches, not with anything except the quiet, stubborn act of being good. Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head bowed. "I'm sorry," he said. The words felt foreign on his tongue. He couldn't remember the last time he had spoken them and meant them. "For what?" Mariah asked. "For thinking I knew who you were. For turning generosity into a test. For..." He stopped, searching for the right words. "For needing you to fail so I could feel right about giving up on people." Mariah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that Nathan would remember for the rest of his life. "You didn't give up on people. You gave up on yourself. And you've been punishing the rest of us ever since." A dying boy, a broken promise, and 2 strangers in a hospital waiting room, finally seeing each other for the first time. Have you ever been completely wrong about someone or about yourself? Drop your story in the comments. And if this one is hitting you in the chest, you're not alone. Subscribe so we can finish this journey together. The words hung in the air between them. You didn't give up on people. You gave up on yourself. And you've been punishing the rest of us ever since. Nathan sat with them, let them settle into the cracks she had already opened. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, to explain, to retreat into the fortress of logic and reason that had protected him for so long. But he couldn't, because she was right. Every test he had conducted, every card he had handed out, every transaction he had watched with cynical certainty, none of it had been about understanding the poor. It had been about confirming his own brokenness, about proving that if he couldn't trust, it was because people weren't trustworthy, that if he couldn't love, it was because love was a weakness, that if he was alone, it was because connection was a liability. He had made his isolation a philosophy, and he had spent 30 years forcing the world to agree with him. "How did you know?" Nathan asked quietly. Mariah tilted her head. "Know what?" "About me." About. He gestured vaguely at himself, at the waiting room, at the space between them. All of it. Mariah studied him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "I didn't know anything about you. I still don't. I don't know your name, where you live, what you do. I don't know why you handed me that card, or why you followed me here." She paused. "But I know what it looks like when someone is hiding, when they've built walls so high they've forgotten there's a person underneath." Her voice softened. "I've been there. After my sister died, after Jalen got sick, I built my own walls, told myself I didn't need anyone, that asking for help was weakness." She looked toward the room at the end of the hall. "But walls don't protect you. They just make sure you're alone when everything falls apart." Nathan followed her gaze to Jalen's room. Through the doorway, he could see the boy's small form beneath the blankets. The eagle's cap had slipped to the side, revealing a smooth scalp, no hair, just pale skin stretched over fragile bone. "Tell me about him," Nathan said. Mariah's face changed. The guardedness softened into something raw and tender. "He's 6. Leukemia, diagnosed when he was 4, right after my sister passed." She swallowed. "The doctors say it's treatable if he gets the right care, the right specialists. But that kind of treatment costs more than I'll make in 10 lifetimes." She shook her head slowly. "He loves football. The Eagles, don't ask me why. We're from Chicago. He says the bird looks tough." A small, sad smile crossed her face. "He used to say he was going to play in the Super Bowl one day. I told him I'd be in the front row, cheering louder than anyone." Her voice wavered. "I just need him to hold on long enough for a miracle." Nathan felt something shift in his chest. A door opening. A decision forming. But he said nothing. "Not yet." "I have a son," Nathan heard himself say. Mariah looked at him, waiting. "David. He's 31, lives in Portland, makes pottery." Nathan almost smiled at the absurdity of it. "I haven't talked to him in 4 years. He told me I treat everything like a transaction, that I can't just be, that I always need to control, to measure, to win." He paused. He was right, and instead of admitting it, I let him walk away. Mariah was quiet for a moment. "Did you try to reach out?" "Once. Twice. Maybe. But I never knew what to say. How do you apologize for being broken? How do you explain that you pushed everyone away because you were terrified of being left?" He shook his head. "I kept telling myself there would be time, that I would figure it out eventually, that one day the right words would come." He looked at Jalen's room. "But time doesn't wait, does it?" Mariah stood up slowly. For a moment, Nathan thought she was leaving, walking away from him, from this conversation, from the strange connection that had formed between them in this sterile waiting room. But she didn't leave. She walked to Jalen's room and stood in the doorway. Then, she turned back to Nathan. "Come meet him," she said. Nathan blinked. What?" "Come meet Jalen." Her voice was steady. "He's awake, and he loves meeting new people." Nathan stood, but his feet wouldn't move. I'm not." He fumbled for words. "I don't know what to say to a dying child." Mariah's expression didn't waver. "You don't have to say anything, you just have to show up." The room was smaller than Nathan expected. Machines hummed softly. Monitors blinked their steady rhythm. The window looked out over the Atlanta skyline, gray and cold, but lit with the pale glow of Christmas morning. Jalen was propped up against a stack of pillows, his eagle's cap straightened now, his eyes, huge and brown and impossibly bright, fixed on the doorway. "Auntie," he said. His voice thin but clear. "Who's that?" "Auntie. One of that auntie. One of that auntie." Mariah crossed to the bed and sat on the edge, taking Jalen's hand in hers. "This is my friend," she said. "He came a long way to meet you." Jalen studied Nathan with the unfiltered curiosity that only children possess. "Are you rich?" he asked. Nathan blinked. Mariah suppressed a smile. "Why do you ask?" Nathan said. "Your shoes are really shiny." Jalen pointed at Nathan's feet. "My mom used to say only rich people have shiny shoes." Nathan looked down at his Italian leather Oxfords, $2,000, handmade, polished to a mirror finish. "I guess I am," he admitted. Jalen nodded solemnly, as if this confirmed an important theory. "That's okay," he said. "Auntie says being rich isn't bad. It's just what you do with it that matters." Nathan felt the words land somewhere deep in his chest. "Your auntie is a very smart woman," he said. He stayed for an hour. Jalen talked about football, about the Eagles, about the Super Bowl he was definitely going to play in, even though the doctor said he had to rest first. He talked about his favorite nurse, Maria, who snuck him extra Jell-O. He talked about his mom, who was in heaven now, watching over him like an angel with really cool wings. Nathan mostly listened. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to talk to a 6-year-old who was dying, but he found that words weren't really necessary. Jalen just wanted someone to hear him, to see him, to treat him like a person instead of a patient. When Jalen's eyes started to droop, Mariah stood and gestured for Nathan to follow her into the hallway. They stood outside the door, neither of them speaking. Finally, Mariah reached into her coat and pulled out the black card. She held it out to Nathan. He looked at it, then at her. "The 24 hours are almost up," she said. Nathan shook his head. "Keep it." "I can't." "Why not?" Mariah pressed the card into his palm. "Because I didn't come here for your money. I came here for that little boy in there. And you, standing here, trying to hand me a card, that's not what I need from you." Nathan stared at her, lost. "Then what do you need?" Mariah held his gaze. "I need you to go home. Call your son. Tell him you were wrong. Tell him you're sorry. Tell him you love him before you run out of time." She paused. "That's what I need. For you to stop running experiments on strangers and start showing up for the people who actually matter." Nathan stood in silence. The card felt heavy in his hand, heavier than it had ever felt before. He thought about David, about the years of silence, about the words he had never said because pride and fear had sealed his mouth shut. He thought about his father. He thought about Jalen, fighting in that room, still dreaming of Super Bowls. And he thought about this woman, this stranger who had nothing, who had been given everything, and who had asked for only one thing in return. "Show up." "Okay," Nathan said quietly. Mariah nodded. "Okay." She turned and walked back into Jalen's room. Nathan watched her settle into the chair beside the bed, taking the boy's hand again, whispering something that made him smile. Nathan looked at the card in his hand. Then he slipped it back into his pocket and walked toward the elevator. He had a phone call to make, and a promise to keep, one Mariah would never know about. A card returned, a fortune rejected, and a billionaire learning that the hardest person to help might be himself. Have you ever had to choose between pride and doing the right thing? Tell us in the comments, and if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, share it with them. The final act is coming. 6 months later. The summer sun hung low over Chicago, painting the skyline in shades of gold and amber. Nathan stood at the window of his penthouse, watching the city pulse with life below. But for the first time in decades, he wasn't thinking about the city. He was thinking about all that had happened in the past 6 months. In February, he had offered Mariah a job. Not charity, not a handout. A real position at Coal Industries, Director of Community Partnerships, overseeing the company's philanthropic initiatives. The salary was generous, the benefits were comprehensive, and the work was meaningful. Mariah had hesitated. "Why me?" she had asked during the interview. "You don't know anything about my qualifications." "I know enough," Nathan had replied. "I know you understand what it means to struggle. I know you understand what people actually need, not what rich people think they need. And I know you'll never let me forget the difference." She had studied him for a long moment. "This isn't because of the card. This is because you're the most qualified person I've ever met for a job that didn't exist until I met you." Mariah had taken the position. She had started in March. The changes had come gradually after that. First, the apartment. Nathan had helped Mariah find a place in a safe neighborhood, a 2-bedroom with good schools nearby, and a park where Talia could play. He had covered the security deposit as an advance on her salary, structured so she could pay it back over time if she wanted to. She had insisted on paying it back. He had known she would. Then, the schools. Talia had been enrolled in a private academy with a scholarship program Nathan had quietly funded. So had 14 other children from Hope's Door, the shelter where Mariah and Talia had spent Christmas Eve. The shelter itself had been next. New beds, new heating system, a renovated kitchen, a medical clinic staffed by volunteer doctors, and a job training program that had already helped 37 residents find employment. Nathan had established a foundation to oversee it all, the Hope's Door Foundation, named not for the shelter, but for what it represented. A door that stayed open. A hope that didn't die. Evening came quickly. And now, 6 months after that Christmas Eve, Nathan stood in the shelter's newly renovated community room, surrounded by people whose lives had been quietly transformed. Mariah was there, dressed in a summer dress that made her look like a different woman from the one he had met in the snow. Talia stood beside her, healthy and bright-eyed, clutching a stuffed unicorn, a replacement for the plastic one with the chipped ear, though Mariah had kept the original on a shelf in their new apartment. The shelter residents were there, dozens of them, gathered for what they had been told was a summer celebration. Free food, free music, a chance to mark how far they had all come. Nathan stepped to the front of the room and cleared his throat. The crowd quieted. 6 months ago, Nathan began, I met a woman outside a hotel on Christmas Eve. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her story. I only knew that she was struggling, and I had more money than I could ever spend. He paused. So I gave her a card. No limit. 24 hours. I told myself I was being generous. But the truth is, I was running an experiment. I wanted to prove that people couldn't be trusted, that the poor would always waste what they were given, that my cynicism was justified. He looked at Mariah. I was wrong. Mariah's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. This woman, Mariah Brooks, spent 24 hours with unlimited resources, and she used them to buy medicine for her daughter, food for strangers, and a plane ticket to hold her dying nephew's hand. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She gave back the card, Nathan continued. She didn't want my money. She wanted me to become a better person. And for the first time in my life, I listened. He took a breath. Everything that has happened since, the jobs, the schools, the foundation, the renovations, none of it would exist without her. She didn't change my mind. She changed my heart. Mariah stepped forward, tears forming. Nathan. But before she could finish, the doors at the back of the room swung open, and a small figure came running through. Auntie. Mariah froze. The room went silent. Jalen sprinted across the floor, his eagle's cap bouncing on his head, his face split into the widest grin imaginable. No tubes, no wheelchair, no pale, fragile frame. Just a healthy, beaming 6-year-old boy running like his life depended on it. He crashed into Mariah's legs and wrapped his arms around her. Jalen? Mariah's voice shattered. But how? They said. I beat it, Auntie. Jalen looked up at her, eyes shining. The doctor said I'm all better. I beat the bad stuff. Mariah collapsed to her knees, pulling him into her arms, her whole body shaking with sobs she couldn't control. "Baby," she whispered. "My baby. Oh, thank God. Thank God." The room erupted. Cheers, tears, applause. But Mariah heard none of it. She just held Jalen, rocking him back and forth, crying into his eagle's cap like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. Nathan watched them, his own eyes burning. Then he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned, and his heart stopped. David, his son, stood behind him, 31 years old, hair longer than Nathan remembered, a cautious smile on his face. "David?" Nathan's voice cracked. "What are you? How?" "Mariah called me," David said quietly. "A few weeks ago. She said you needed family here today, that you'd never ask for it yourself, but that you deserved to have someone show up for you." Nathan looked at Mariah, who was still holding Jalen, still crying, but watching him now with a small, knowing smile through her tears. She had done this. The woman who had nothing had given him back his son. David stepped closer. "Dad, I've watched you these past 6 months, helping people, really helping them. Not for credit, not for recognition. I watched you change." His voice wavered, and I realized, if you could change, maybe I could forgive. He opened his arms, and Nathan, the billionaire who had built walls for 30 years, stepped into his son's embrace and wept. Later, after the celebration had wound down, Nathan and Mariah sat alone on the front steps of Hope's door. "You paid for his treatment," Mariah said quietly. Nathan nodded. The day after Christmas, while Mariah had flown back to Chicago to be with Talia, Nathan had made a series of phone calls. The best pediatric oncologist in the country, a specialist from Johns Hopkins, a research team in Boston that was pioneering new treatments for childhood leukemia. He had paid for everything: the consultations, the treatments, the experimental therapies, the round-the-clock care, and he had made them all swear the same thing. "She cannot know. Not yet. Not until he's better." Mariah shook her head slowly. "I knew there was a donor. I just didn't know." She stopped, wiped her eyes. "I didn't know he was already healed. I thought I was still waiting for a miracle." "You deserve to see it happen," Nathan said. "Not hear about it." Mariah was quiet for a moment. "And you called David?" "No." Nathan smiled. "You did. I meant what I said back in Atlanta. Fix what's broken in your own house." She turned to him. "But I never said I couldn't help." Nathan laughed softly. "You're impossible." "So I've been told." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge above the city. Finally, Mariah spoke. "That night, Christmas Eve, you thought you were testing me. But you were really testing yourself. Whether you could handle being wrong, whether you could let go of your certainty and actually see another person." She held his gaze. "Most people fail that test. They protect their worldview at all costs. But you didn't. You let yourself be changed." Nathan nodded slowly. "I almost didn't," he admitted. "I almost convinced myself you were the exception." "What stopped you?" "Your note. Please, don't let him die alone." He shook his head. "I realized I was the one dying alone. I was the one who needed saving." Mariah reached over and squeezed his hand. "And now?" Nathan looked back at the shelter, at the people inside, at Jalen chasing Talia through the room, at David laughing with one of the volunteers. "Now," he said, "I finally understand what wealth really means." Inside the shelter, Jalen had fallen asleep on a couch, his eagle's cap still firmly on his head. In Portland, a moving truck was being loaded. David was coming home to Chicago. And on a shelf in Mariah's new apartment, a plastic pink unicorn with a chipped ear sat in a place of honor, a reminder of the night everything changed. There are 2 truths this story leaves behind. The first, true wealth is not measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give. When giving costs you something, anyone can donate what they don't need. But real generosity, the kind that transforms you, requires sacrifice. It requires giving your time, your pride, your certainty. Nathan spent 30 years accumulating. He only became wealthy the moment he learned to let go. The second, the people who have the least often carry the most resilience, the most compassion, the most wisdom. We measure worth by bank accounts, but the richest person in any room might be the one with nothing in their pocket and everything in their heart. Mariah had $17 on Christmas Eve. She was the wealthiest person Nathan had ever met. The test was never about money. The test was what they did when they finally had power. Power to help, power to heal, power to change. And they both passed. This is where our story ends, but maybe it's where yours begins. If this story made you feel something, made you want to be a little better than you were an hour ago, then it did what it was meant to do. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us what it meant to you. And if stories like this still matter to you, if you believe that character will always be worth more than wealth, then you're already one of us. Subscribe, stay close, and remember, the test isn't whether you have power. The test is what you do when you finally have it.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.